During the early hours of October 28, 1941, the Italian ambassador in Athens handed an ultimatum to Greek Prime Minister Ioannis Metaxas. The message demanded the free passage of Italian troops into strategic points scattered around Greece, and the government had 3 hours to comply. It said no more. The request was unacceptable, and Metaxas knew the Italians were just provoking them. He then muttered the words, quote, "Then it is war." The Prime Minister then rallied his people for the fight, and hours later, Italian soldiers began pouring into Greece. For the first time in centuries, the descendants of the Roman legions and the Greek hoplites would wage all-out war to control continental Greece and the Aegean. A Second Roman Empire. Before World War I, Greece and several European countries under the Ottoman Empire's rule fought a desperate civil war to gain independence after centuries of Islamic occupation. With support from European powers, including a Russian empire that considered itself the protector of all Orthodox Christians, the Greeks achieved their dream of liberty and became a monarchy. Still, the road to peace was strewn with obstacles. World War I soon broke out, and the region was engulfed in another brutal conflict. Moreover, the situation worsened for the Greeks during the post-war period. Despite the economic and social struggle as a result of the war, Italian Prime Minister and future dictator Benito Mussolini began dreaming of an imperial Italy reminiscent of the ancient Roman Empire. He claimed that fascist Italy needed spazio vitale for its surplus population, and the way to go was through an imperial or colonial expansion, similar to what France and the United Kingdom had done and continued to do. Unfortunately for the Greeks, just like the kingdoms of Albania, Yugoslavia, Bulgaria, Romania, and Hungary, their own kingdom was part of Mussolini's imperial and territorial ambitions. Furthermore, the outbreak of the Second Italo-Ethiopian War in 1935 exposed the aggressive Italian foreign policy pushed by the Duce. The campaign's success and the Italian intervention during the Spanish Civil War gave Mussolini and his army enough confidence to begin a full-fledged expansion of fascist Italy. Then, on April 7, 1939, the Italian army invaded Albania and occupied the country in just 3 days. Mussolini had put the first stone of his expansion through the Balkans, and Greece was next on the list. Boiling point. Greece sought the support of the British if Italy ever decided to invade the country. This notion was reinforced by the Italian invasion of Albania and Mussolini's threat to take over Greece. The Greek army began to mobilize men for a possible invasion and secured its borders. During Italian Prime Minister Galeazzo Ciano's visit to occupied Albania, the Italians were heard singing, quote, "We will go to the Aegean and we take Piraeus, and if all goes well, we will take Athens too." Ciano also wrote in his diary, quote, "The entire road-building program has been directed towards the Greek border, and this is by order of the Duce, who's thinking more and more of attacking Greece at the first opportunity." The road-building program was part of the massive mobilization that Mussolini was preparing, and the Greeks and British were well aware. Still, in response to a letter from Greek Prime Minister Ioannis Metaxas, Mussolini wrote that if he ever went to war with other nations, he would respect Greek neutrality. The Third Reich had just invaded Poland, and it was widely known that Hitler and Mussolini were allies. As the months passed, Italy's entry into the Continental War seemed inevitable. Between January and May of 1940, anti-Greek resentment grew in Italy after British warships were spotted near Crete and other Greek islands. A base was set up at Milos, and Italian protests increased. Additionally, Greece was forced to sign an exclusive trade agreement with Britain that limited exports to Germany, which violated the country's neutral stance. Mussolini saw this as the perfect opportunity to declare war against Greece and ordered his generals to retake the invasion plans. His ambitious spazio vitale objectives were now underway. Toying with Hitler. The Duce was mad at Hitler for not letting him know about his invasion of Poland in September of 1939, His animosity grew when the Wehrmacht gave him little space to participate in the conquest of France in June of 1940. But Hitler had his reasons. Mussolini was highly impulsive, and as several officers said, he often talked too much and did very little. Still, following Italy's symbolic participation in the invasion of France, the Italian army invaded Egypt and North Africa to cleanse them from French and Commonwealth forces. However, the Duce's ambitious plans to take over Greece and the Balkans were repeatedly halted by Hitler and the German High Command. In July of 1940, his planned invasion of Yugoslavia was cancelled after Hitler insisted it was not a good idea. The Führer was working on establishing alliances in the Balkans to gather allies for the invasion of the Soviet Union, and was not interested in Mussolini running the plan. Mussolini was convinced that Germany was attempting to block Italy from acquiring more territories before the war with Britain was over, but it was more complicated than that. Hitler and the Wehrmacht attachés insisted that he had to concentrate his forces in North Africa to successfully get rid of the Commonwealth forces. France had surrendered, but the United Kingdom still posed a threat, and it had to be eradicated to secure the region and the Mediterranean. However, Mussolini went forward, and between July and August of 1940, Italian aircraft began to harass Greek vessels in ports. Submarine attacks soon followed. The Italian leader constantly told Hitler that there was no way he would invade Greece without letting him know first. Except he did, soon ordering his forces to concentrate on the Greek border to prepare for an invasion. Following Germany's entry into Romania on October 7, 1940, Mussolini reassured the Führer that he would not invade. As such, Hitler was completely caught off guard when he was notified that Mussolini had launched a full-scale invasion of Greece on October 28th. The Legion's offensive. At 3 a.m. on October 28th, Greece received an ultimatum from Italy. The Greeks were to allow Italy's occupation of specific strategic points in the country, or war would break out. The Greeks had 3 hours to respond. There was little to no time for negotiations, and although Greece wanted to avoid conflict at all costs, there was no way out. A newspaper wrote, quote, "Today there is no Greek who does not add his voice to the thunderous Oci. Oci, we will not hand over Greece to Italy. Oci, Italian ruffians will not set foot on our land. Oci, the barbarians will not desecrate our Parthenons." Italian aircraft soon broke into the Greek airspace and began conducting reconnaissance and bombing missions, while the Italian army advanced into the country from different sectors. The infantry was accompanied by over 650 artillery pieces, 150 light tanks, and more than 440 aircraft. 6 divisions comprised 12 regiments, and over 87,000 troops were split into several columns. One of them moved from the south and went to Konispol with the task of capturing Igoumenitsa. Meanwhile, the central sector comprised 2 columns bound for Pilates, and the Ferrara division, the largest of all, went straight after the Greek garrisons that had established a defensive line at Kalpaki. Also, the Julia division was split into 5 columns and sent towards Metsovo to capture it and confront Greek forces near Epirus. Ground operations were quickly hampered by logistics and a lack of proper reconnaissance of the Greek terrain. As Italian troops began to pour into Greece through Albania, ammunition and supply trucks were still in Italy. Moreover, Mussolini's Roman army mainly consisted of conscripts and undertrained men. The armed forces could only rely on the expertise of elite troops such as the Bersaglieri, the Alpini, and the Blackshirt divisions. The hoplites' counterattack. The Greek army had 14 infantry divisions, 3 infantry brigades, and 1 cavalry division to fight off the invaders. Over 50,000 troops were pitched against the superior numbers of the Italians. Many of these men were veterans of the Balkan Wars of 1912 and 1913, World War I, and the Greco-Turkish War of 1919. But despite their outdated equipment, the Greek soldiers were more than motivated to defend their homeland. In the beginning, the Italian corps was caught by torrential rains. Still, the elite Bersaglieri and the Centauro division headed to the Kalamas River, where they first confronted the Greek guerrilla. At Epirus, which had been the gateway into Greece since times of old, General Alexandros Papagos concentrated his valiant Greek warriors and vigorously defended their positions to stop the Italian advance. Papagos had adopted an elastic defense to attack the Italians with a coordinated defensive line. As such, he was willing to give up territory instead of scattering his soldiers. Meanwhile, far in the Pindus Mountains, the elite Alpini troopers and their Albanian auxiliaries made their way through ice and snow. They struggled to climb over rough terrain over 1,500 meters high, but managed to do it. The situation was different for the members of the Julia Division, who were transferred from the arid conditions in Libya and were failing to acclimate to the region's cold weather. Knowing the mountains very well, the Greeks attacked the Italians from concealed positions with artillery and small arms fire. The Alpini were constantly harassed by the Greeks, who often recurred to bayonet attacks to halt their advance through the hills. Still, the Italians managed to penetrate some 30 kilometers into Greek territory. The defenders then regrouped at Kalpaki and decimated the Julia Division, forcing it to retreat. The Italians suffered a similar fate in the Epirus region. The fortified Greeks used every artillery piece to destroy the advancing Italian armor. Accurate machine gun fire suppressed the enemy infantry and forced the Italians to constantly take cover. By November 9th, it had become apparent to Mussolini that taking over Greece had been a mistake. The Italian offensive had failed, and Greece was not a simple walk in the park. His top brass, and especially Hitler, were furious. Still, the Duce was hard-headed and ordered his troops to keep pushing forward. Clash at Kilsura Pass. Following the end of the Italian offensive, the Greeks counterattacked with unparalleled momentum. Meter by meter, Mussolini's legionaries began to give up the terrain to the Greek hoplites. Slowly but steadily, the Italians were pushed back into Albania. Simultaneous skirmishes, artillery barrages, bayonet charges, and thick snow falling from the sky did not help the Italians gather the strength to fight back. The winter was harsh, and the logistics quickly worsened. Food and medical supplies began to run short, and they had to start eating their mules and horses. Frostbite and hypothermia also took a heavy toll on the Italians, and many men opted to desert. By January of 1941, the Greeks had reached Korka and the Kilsura Pass, ready to break the Italian morale. But the harsh winter was also taking hold on the Greeks. The Italian soldiers marched for almost 24 hours without rest under heavy weather to prevent being overrun by the advancing Greeks, and the Julia Division suffered over 4,000 casualties. Some Italian M13 medium tanks from the Centauro Division saw action for the first time at the Kilsura Pass, but were of little use against the Greek artillery barrages. The clash stabilized the front and gave the Italians a taste of Greek resilience, but more Italian reinforcements were called in to prevent a full retreat. By then, Hitler had begun to assemble German forces for immediate intervention following the presence of British troops in the region. Operation Marita, the German invasion of Greece, would be launched in April of 1941 to aid the Italians and stop the British presence in the Aegean. Thank you for watching our video. Please like and subscribe to our Dark Documentaries channels to find more exciting historical content. And don't forget to hit the bell icon to be notified of our newest videos. Stay tuned.